Welcome to the Bros of Gardening. I'm Mike Westphal, and I'm joined by my co-host Daniel Van Dyke. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, bud. I think we're finally into spring.
Yep, I know. So we're going to talk a little bit about a topic that I know is near and dear to you, hardscaping. But of course, need to introduce Alex, our producer, that will help guide us through this and ask us lots of questions and really ask you a lot of questions. And I'm going to kind of start because I'm going to say, what is hardscaping?
Yeah, and so that's a good question. So I know what I think of when it comes to hardscaping. That term can be such a broad brush, and so I think that can be anywhere from, to me, what hardscapes is we have like a hardscape crew, a hardscape foreman, and that's really installing patios, installing paver features and block features, whether it's retaining walls. But really, hardscapes can be anywhere from rock gardens. It can be stepping stones. It can be, even a water feature, with boulders. Yep. I mean, all of those are technically hardscapes. So to me, again, a lot of what I'll talk about on this is it has to do more with like patios and things like that. But hardscapes really is a pretty broad brush in the sense of, to me, it's kind of anything to do. The rock obviously is a really popular one. Concrete, pavers, all that type of stuff. Pretty much all that rolls back into hardscapes. But then even natural stone is a really popular one. Slate and things like that would all kind of fall under that umbrella. And so there's a lot of different things you can do with hardscapes. And so I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah. I think it definitely adds texture too. I mean,
it breaks it up a little.
Just a garden with nothing but plants feels like it might be lacking something.
Right. But also you can also go through your garden too if you introduce like pathways and everything, which I think is a huge improvement. But I guess, yes, this is kind of like an interview for this one, Daniel. So I hope you're ready for all these questions.
I'm going to have questions too.
All right, cool. All right, so how do you balance hardscaping with plants so that the yard doesn't feel like a parking lot?
It's a really good question. So I think this is something that we get approached with a lot because obviously people want to maximize, a lot of times the point of the hardscapes is functionality, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to build a patio, you're trying to lay out a patio, it's really hard to not want the biggest patio you can have. Right. Or again, from a low maintenance standpoint, you put a big patio out and you're going to cut down on whether it's cutting the grass, bedscapes, whatever. But there are, I do always recommend some combination of a softscape in the sense of plantings. Now that can take shape in one of my favorites to talk about is containers. We've talked about container gardening. We've talked about different things like that. And so you can really soften up an area. You have this big lush, bright, vibrant container. It's one of our, most popular things we do when we finish a patio is we'll spec out just a couple, conveniently and strategically placed containers. You can get a lot of color out of the pots. You can get a lot of texture out of the pots, and you have this big lush, green. A lot of times it can be like a tropical feel or whatever the case may be, but just kind of that really, you want to pick something that's going to be lush to really soften up that area. You can also do it with accent beds. I mean, a really cool aesthetic is if you have, a big patio and you can cut in like a semicircle bed right in the, off to the corner, maybe take two corners to kind of give you some symmetry. And you, again, can just plant those beds up. You don't have to do a ton of planting. They don't have to be very big. But again, just some other texture that's not, pavers are made out of concrete, but so that's not concrete or hardscapes. A little bit can go a long way, I guess is my point. So you don't have to have these huge beds or have, 100 pots on your patio. But a few strategically placed elements like that can really soften up that area. And again, it gives you a little bit of stuff you can play with. That can be vegetable gardening. Yeah. I mean, you can do a lot of different things in those. So it's still kind of a functional bed or a functional aspect of it. But it can really soften up the hardscape as well.
Yeah. And I think people think hardscapes and they think brick and they think square, rectangular.
Yeah, I think
it doesn't have driveway. To be, right? I mean, you can put curves in all of it. In fact, when you design it, you're probably adding curves on it.
We recommend the curves, and I mean, and that's the, you can cut these shapes in and make some really cool different features. And it's a good point. Curvilinear lines can really soften up. Yeah. It's still hardscapes, but you do some curvilinear line in there, it'll really soften up that area, and it doesn't feel as kind of like, that concrete jungle feel.
Right.
So that's really what we recommend, and that's a great point. The curvilinear lines goes a long way as well.
Yeah. So, and I've got a question here. I mean, if talking about plants, in my head, I would say to myself, let me get my beds laid out. Then I'll say, maybe this is where I want a patio now that I kind of know where my garden is going or where my landscape design is going. But would you say do hardscaping first or second?
So it's funny you say that because I do feel like people do. And again,
you can make it work either way.
I was about to say, you can make it work. A lot of times, it could be a budget decision of why they tackle one versus the other. But I would actually recommend doing the hardscape first. And there's a couple of reasons why. So a lot of times if you're putting in a patio, for example, there's going to be some equipment involved probably.
That's a good point.
And so, equipment can be destructive at times, depending on how big a patio. They have to deliver materials, pallets of pavers.
Right.
You have to run the material into the backyard. So it's a little bit more of a construction than, say, installing your actual landscape. And so we would recommend, let us tear it up.
Yep.
And put the hardscape in, and then let's put it back. And that comes back to, again, is if you want to do it, we recommend, if somebody comes to us and says, hey, we have X amount of dollars to spend and we want this. Well, a lot of times what we'll say is, we're going to have to phase this.
Right.
And so do the design, plan the entire backyard, go for the dream design, and then take it piece by piece. And then you can kind of strategically plan out, okay.
That's a good point.
The first thing I'm going to do is the patio this year, then I'll do all the planting beds next year or next season, whatever the case may be.
Right.
Because that way, you're not running over work that you just got done trying to install new stuff. And again, hardscapes is a little bit more construction based, heavier material, pallets of material.
Yeah.
So it can be a little bit more destructive than running in soils and mulches and things like that. So
and you can do it all. You can do it.
Absolutely.
Like our landscape company could do it all. You get a good landscape company, they're gonna be able to do it all. And that's how you would do it.
Absolutely.
You would build the hardscape features in first, and then you'd come back and plant all your beds.
That's how we always plan it if we can, and it'll allow us. And so that's definitely how we recommend doing it if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you guys have designers too, where you know immediately when you go to the site, like where stuff is going.
Well, and that's the whole point is when you're doing your landscape design plan is people want to focus on one area. And a lot of times if you have this corner of the yard that you don't like looking at, you want to focus and fixate on that. And that's what think about the yard as one cohesive plan so that when you're planning it out, staging it, whatever the case may be, you're not going to be messing up things or wasting time and energy on something that you're going to end up tearing up. So that's really why I always recommend, we've talked about the planning stage, but really just that design stage is so important because you want everything to work together, not just from an aesthetic standpoint, but just a functionality standpoint as well. And you don't want to waste your time and energy doing things that you're going to end up moving or ripping out in a year or two when you're ready to do the whole yard.
Right. And don't let it scare you away. If you have an existing landscape and it's an established landscape, you don't want to do a lot of changes, but you still want some walkways or a patio, it can be done as well.
For sure.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then we'll transition to kind of the next question pretty well. What has been the most difficult hardscaping project you guys have had to tackle, or you personally?
That's a good question. One of the more challenging ones we did, so a lot of times it has to do with like topography and elevation. That's what's going to cause you issues. And so what comes into play when you do that is going to be retaining walls, and it's going to be things of that nature. And so the problem with that is, and I even dealt with this a little bit at my own house, the backyard of my house dropped off so fast, is, patios, if you want to be able to enjoy sitting on one and you want to be able to enjoy that space, it can only have but so much grade to it, or you're going to feel like you're sitting sideways. And that's never what you want. And so really you can do, we recommend about an inch fall over every 10 feet. So if the grade falls off way higher than that, you have to fix that grade. And so I'm sorry if this sounds too technical. But,
no, it's fine.
So you build up that retaining wall, and then essentially what you do is you have to backfill that. Well, again, the problem is a lot of times you're on a hill, so it's hard to get equipment back there.
Yeah.
And so I remember one of the projects, it fell off so hard. The access around the sides of the houses were 2 3-foot gates.
Oh, geez.
It had stone on both sides, so we couldn't go any wider than that. So we had to bring everything around by hand. So that was 10 pallets of retaining wall blocks had to be brought around by hand, and about 50,000 pounds of backfill.
Wow.
So about 25 tons of stone to backfill that. And,
how many wheelbarrow furrows did that take?
Yeah. So it was obviously that makes things more difficult.
Yep.
And so you can solve a lot of your problems. You can, and it's just you have to pay attention to those little details because when the grade does fall off. Now walkways are different. Walkways can follow grade a little bit more. You can kind of roll with them, but when you're doing patios and things like that, so that was one that was just. The property itself, given the difficulties of the elevation and thing like that, made that one increasingly difficult for us. But we got it done. And then we've even done like a tiered retaining wall, which again, walls are just very, labor intensive, and they're heavy stones and stuff. So that in and of itself make them a little bit more challenging. But you can figure out some creative ways to do stuff. That's just, you got to think it. You got to shoot some grades, and that's where we come in, and we can come in and do all that for you and figure out the best way to get it accomplished.
Very cool.
All right. Well, actually, Mike, I'm going to turn this over to you now.
No.
If you're ready. All right. So what is the most common hardscaping project people ask for when they come into the garden center? Like if someone's coming off the street and they don't immediately know that we have a landscaping company, they just see McDonald Garden Center. Someone comes in. What do you get most?
They typically are asking for a walkway. I mean, that's probably most, I think, DIYers are going to say, hey, I can do this. I can put a walkway in. And I love, giving them the option of, just rock. I mean, you can do it with, pea gravel or a gray stone or river pebbles. I mean, there's a lot of different types of rock out there. And there you just, cut out your path and you put down weed fabric. This is the one time I really recommend using weed fabric. And as Daniel knows, a good weed fabric will prevent your rock from sinking into the dirt because it's heavier than the soil. So over time, it'll look great right when you install it, but over time, the rock starts to move down and the soil starts to move up. So I don't love it under mulch. It can be used, it can be done correctly, but for under rock, it's almost necessary. It's definitely recommended. So that would be an easy one. Slate and bluestone are really easy options because you can I've done it in lawns before where you're creating a pathway through the lawn. Yeah. And you can just cut out the sod basically in the shape of the stone, and then you drop it in. So stepping stones are easy, and I think rocked pathways are something that DIYers could do fairly easily, and that's typically what people ask.
You can go to the store and you can get that and come home and plant it.
And I'd say, you mentioned earlier fountains. I mean, I'd say the number one hardscape item that we sell is certainly statuary. I mean, it's something that you can take home with you. You can pop it in your landscape and you are done. You've got a hardscape. You got something that's in your landscape that is no longer, it's not roots, it doesn't have leaves, it's not living. So, but it adds a lot of value.
Yeah. All right, let's see here. Make sure I'm on the right track. All right. So, Daniel, what is one hardscaping feature that instantly, in your opinion, upgrades the landscape?
So, for me, I think the easy answer is a patio. Yeah. Anything like that. Again, that can be a bigger project to take on. Mike had, if you, depending on your budget, it's all specific to the customer. A lot of times, something as easy as like a fountain or again, stepping stones that a lot of times that's bred out of a need. So if you need to get from A to B and you want to be able to stay dry, don't have to get muddy, it's going through the grass, the yard, an informal walkway made out of stepping stones can be, fairly easy to do. It can have a huge impact and you might use it every single day, which makes it that much more worth it. So a lot of times that's the kind of the beauty of hardscapes is it will aesthetically enhance your yard immediately, but it's also very functional. It's something you're going to use and enjoy, and it solves a problem for you, which is kind of one of my favorite things. But for me, if you're really trying to have an impact, if you can create an entertainment area outside for yourself or your family, a place to host a dinner, a place to sit out back on a nice night and maybe have a drink, whatever the case may be, I really, really enjoy patios because it's kind of an extension of your house. We talked about this a little bit on one of the previous podcasts, but everybody who's ever tried to build a house, put on an addition, the price per square foot is out of this world. And so, especially right now, it seems like. So, if you're trying to add space and entertainment areas to your house, even though they can be expensive, a patio is actually a pretty cheap and easy way to do it. And it's a different aspect. Like I said, you can enjoy the outdoors. It's a different feel. So, really, it's an extension of your home, and it's a way to add on square footage to your home. And again, I think they're obviously visually and aesthetically pleasing, but they really do serve a purpose as well.
And it definitely increases the value of your home. You're right. Adding on a sunroom or an extension is one thing, but to do a patio, people love to entertain outside, and it just adds so much value to your landscape. And we talked about it like with Japanese maples. Like Japanese maples, we used to say, an established Japanese maple like upgrades your landscape and increases your home value, not as much as a patio would. Yeah. A true well-done paver patio will increase your land value significantly. So it's definitely recommended. And I've got a question on that because this is why I think it's so important that if you can do it with a landscape designer and a landscape company, that you're going to benefit from it, because I don't even know the layers that go underneath a patio. I think that's so important. You're not going to give away any trade secrets here, but I think it's important just to explain that it's a lot more work than it's just, hey, scrape off the top soil or just, cut down and just put your stones on the ground.
Right. I think that's what it is too, is like you said, is when people look at the patio, it's hard to see kind of what goes into that.
Yeah.
But that is by far the most important part. When people talk about how hard it is to install things like that, really the actual installation of the stones themselves or the pavers themselves, it really isn't that hard. But what it is prepping that base so that it is built to last. I mean, we essentially guarantee our work when it comes to it. So that's why you have to dig down. We dig down 7-8 inches every single time. And then we backfill it and compact it and lifts so that it gets a nice firm base. And so really what that does is it prevents settling.
Yeah.
It prevents it's a perfectly smooth surface. And that's what you see a lot. And a lot of times, unfortunately, whether it was something that maybe a homeowner did or maybe a company who wasn't as familiar with the way to do it, is we're coming in and fixing other things. Somebody has an existing patio that they're not happy with. And that's, like Mike said, is the layers literally and figuratively that go into building that patio and that hardscapes. Now, again, but even something you mentioned earlier that's a great point is landscape fabric. I mean, when you're doing things like rock, if you want to do a little bit more of an informal walkway, laying stepping stones in the path and then doing rock around them, but thinking about the process of, hey, we want to have something to delineate that, whether that's edging, that can be block edging, aluminum edging, different types of edging, and then having that landscape fabric underneath it to prevent the settling so that your rock doesn't mix with that soil as quickly and everything else. So, I mean, just thinking through the prep and the underneath of what's, everybody wants to fixate on how nice the rocks look, whatever the case may be, but what's underneath it is going to be much more important to the longevity of enjoying that.
Sounds very familiar to planting a plant.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it does. Same concept when you're prepping a bed. You got to prep your area so that everything's really ready to thrive and withstand the test of time, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. I mean, there's so many steps, and that's why I really, whenever a customer comes in and asks for it, I really recommend Landscape to do it because, I mean, the snap edging, what's the stuff that you put over the top, like the sand or whatever it is?
So polymeric sand is something that's been around now. It was created for things around pools and stuff like that. It's essentially a sand that has a gluing agent, a polymer agent.
Wow.
And so when you wet that sand, it kind of activates that polymer. So it kind of locks in. I'm not going to say it's as hard as like grout in your tile, but it feels about that. I mean, it's fairly hard. It still has some pliability. It still has the advantages of sand. But what it does is it doesn't wash out as quickly. It doesn't run off. And so it really, I mean, when I first started, and that's just, the world of hardscapes is ever changing, because when I started here, I was started on one of the first things I did was learn hardscapes. I was the hardscapes foreman for a couple years, and that was kind of how I cut my teeth here in the landscape department. And so we just used normal sand because that's what the company or the industry standard was. Now we don't do a project without polymeric sand. We only used to use it in specific situations around pools when there was a lot of runoff because we needed that sand to lock in. But then we just realized, well, it's just so much better product. It helps with weed control. It helps with, you don't want to have a bunch of weeds growing up in the joints. And so everything about it was just a better product, a little bit more expensive, but it was just, it created a better product and experience for the customer. And so that's what we use on every project now. And the cool thing is you can get it in different colors. There's black polymeric sand, tan, gray. So you can kind of play with the colors, contrast, just like when you see that wall of grout colors in the for tile. I'm not saying there's that many options, but you can still play with it a little bit and try to figure out what's going to work best for you. And so that's another kind of creative aspect of it.
Nice.
All right, cool. Well, let's see where I'm at here. Yes. So what would we say is the biggest mistake people make when they're trying to do DIY hardscaping?
I think that's the perfect segue, because for me, it's really not prepping the base. And so that's, again, you can go buy pavers, you can go buy brick, whatever the case may be, and you can lay it out on the ground and create a patio. But at the same time, what you're going to have is it's not going to be level, or even if it is level, it's not going to be level for long. Things like roots and runoff and a lot of different things can affect that. So what I would say and I encourage anybody who wants to get out in the garden and work on their garden and install new things, more power to you, do it. Just when it comes to the hardscapes, do a little bit of research because a little bit goes into the planning part of that, because somebody who, if you don't take the time to prep that base, you're going to have issues long term, and that's going to be really frustrating because it is a labor intensive process to get that brick around back into the backyard and lay everything out. And then if a couple months later it looks like the rolling mountains because you have them settling and there's no base underneath them, nothing's more frustrating than that. And like I said, unfortunately, however you look at it, a lot of times that is how we come with customers is because they've tried to either do it themselves or somebody who didn't prep that base, and that really causes long-term issues. So I would say the biggest thing is just tackling the project without worrying about the prep work that goes into it, because we spend just as much time, if not more, digging and prepping the base as we do actually laying, installing, and tamping the pavers. That's
really important. I mean, I do a lot of containers at my house, and I put them out in the landscape, and I'll use a technique that I learned here, which is go put a few bricks on the ground, maybe like 2 or 3 high, just to get them up off the ground. Maybe they're nestled amongst a ground cover or something. I wanted to sit up a little bit. Just that will shift and change. I mean, and I don't do it properly. I'm the first one to admit it, but it takes me a while just to get 4 bricks somewhat level. And then because I don't put anything underneath them, 6 months from now, I got to go and kind of stuff something back under one side because it's starting to settle. So it's really important that you get those specifics about the base right.
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly, this whole podcast should just be called prep because
I mean,
if you don't do it.
If I could recommend one thing to anybody who's either vetting a company that could be doing it for them or looking at doing it themselves, is really pay attention to the base and ask the company that's installing it, how do you prep the base? Because if they don't know how to answer that correctly, then they unfortunately probably aren't going to do a very good job.
No, probably not. All right, let's see here. Okay, so are there any hardscaping materials that you love that people don't use enough?
Oh, man. I'll give you 2.
Okay.
One a little bit more of a project, and then one that's pretty easy. The one that's a little bit more to take on is a fire pit. Again, they're very popular, but I feel like people like to look at them. But I mean, for me personally, there's nothing better than having a group of friends over, sitting around on a nice night.
Yeah.
Again, they've come a long way. There's so many different shapes, textures, sizes to them. They're precast. There's some that can get delivered right on a pallet that you don't even have to build anymore.
Right.
They go right on top of a patio. So if you have a patio, you put down a little bit of protective sand underneath it, and then you can just go right on top of a patio. So it doesn't have to be, or you can honestly just do it right out in the yard and put some rock around it if you want it to be a little bit more informal, if you don't want to tackle putting an entire patio in. So you can get creative with fire pits. One of my favorite things to do if you have like a larger backyard is do kind of like a displaced fire pit, where you may have like a patio sitting area, then you do some informal stepping stones that lead to another sitting area with a fire pit in the yard. Or if you're lucky enough to maybe be near some water, getting a vantage point of having like a fire pit. I mean, like I said, it's hard to beat for me personally, but again, that can be a little bit more of something to take on. If you're looking for something quick and easy, you don't have to take care of, which is always kind of my selling point for hardscapes, boulders.
Yeah.
I mean, boulders are something that can create a focal point. It can be a statement piece in your garden. You don't have to do anything to them. There's no pruning. There's no watering. There's nothing to do. The hardest part is getting it there because they are a boulder. But there are 1-man boulders, 2-man boulders. You can take smaller boulders and make kind of a formation out of them. You can play with them and do a lot of things. But once you do it, you're done. You just enjoy it. They're not going to wash away. They're not going to go anywhere. And again, if you don't have a lot of water, you don't have a lot of time to spend on planting a new specimen or focal point, boulders are great.
Yep.
It's a natural stone. So if you have stepping stones, it kind of ties all those areas in together. So that's something where if somebody has us come out, they have a pretty nice existing foundation beds, whatever the case may be, and they're looking to just kind of spruce it up a little bit, add an element to it. I love fountains and stuff like that, but nothing is lower maintenance than boulders and rock in general.
Yeah.
Rock's becoming increasingly more popular, but boulders I feel like could be utilized even more to kind of create that impact.
Yeah, I was going to say rock. I mean, I think people use it for drainage purposes or different types of reasons around that. But I mean, use it as I think you brought up a great point. I mean, a little bit more informal, where you could maybe you got a bench sitting out in your landscape that you just like to go sit underneath a tree or something. Put down a little weed fabric, put some rock on it, and you've got yourself a little pad, and it's quick and simple and easy, and it's hardscapes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's funny you say that about it because the first couple of beds that I ever installed with rock were all drainage related. It was just muddy. They couldn't get rid of the water. It was a low-lying area, so there's really nowhere to take the water. So it's just embrace it, right? But then all of a sudden we step back and be like, well, this actually looks pretty cool too. And like the customers really loved it. And sometimes we were like, hey, this looks better than even just like a normally landscaped bed. So rock has become more and more popular, but it's still probably underutilized, especially if you're this low maintenance wave, which we covered in a podcast a few weeks back. But that rock is a good one that got born out of like drainage, but now it's becoming a more of an aesthetic choice, even if it's just no drainage needed.
Yeah, people even use it like on the top of their pots.
Oh yeah,
you see that a lot.
That's what I do.
I actually have
put it around your plants that you have in a container. So
I think it looks cool. It definitely, at least now, the rocks in a bed look a little bit more, at least to me, like professional and high quality.
Yeah, for sure.
But okay. Well, speaking of, what would be better, stone, brick, or pavers, or is it just really about how you use them?
So it's definitely about how you use them. Admittedly, for full disclosure, we don't work with a lot of brick. The classic brick, that clay brick. I mean, pavers were created in my opinion, to be a superior product to clay brick. So we do not use a lot of brick. A lot of people do, and they do a great job with it. And so, but for what we do, it's really pavers or stone. I think, again, it comes down to the application. There is plenty of opportunity to use natural stone, whether it's a walkway. We've talked about different ways to do it, rock beds, boulders, whatever the case may be. But if you're talking about a hardscape in the sense of creating a sitting area, a patio, I always recommend pavers. And the cool thing about pavers is they've come so far. So with pavers now, they actually make them with textured tops so that I'm not saying they look exactly like a natural stone, but they're created to look more natural. So it doesn't look like just a piece of concrete. Cool. It has texture to it. It looks like it's a little bit more natural. And that is by far the most popular thing we install now. Yeah. And so they've come so far. Even when I started doing this, it was 6x6, 6x9s, and we laid them, and that's what we did. And now it's, large format where they're 24 inches by 24 inches, and you mix them together, and you can have 6-7 different sizes in the same patio.
Very cool.
And so there's so many different things you can do now. So I always, even if somebody wants that kind of natural feel, I'll still recommend pavers if somebody is trying to. And there's, slate. There's so many different options you can do when it comes to patios and stuff. Just from a durability standpoint, an aesthetic standpoint, you take everything and put it together. It's hard to beat pavers. It's poured concrete, but it doesn't look like concrete. Because it's not a solid pour concrete. You don't have the breaks which you do in concrete patios and walkways. So I'm a big fan of pavers, but I love stone. I love natural stone as well. Just in certain applications, natural stone is exactly what it is. It's hard to get perfectly level. There's texture. That's why people like it, is because of the it's not cookie cutter. Every little piece is different and unique. That's great. If you're trying to create a sitting area where you're going to have the feet of chairs, it's not even necessarily about standing on it. You think about, like, if you have these joints that are irregular, and then all of a sudden the leg of your chair goes in that joint, you're not going to be very happy. So it's just thinking through those parts of it that really make the difference to me, as why I suggest pavers so heavily as opposed to natural stone and even brick, just because like the durability of pavers to brick is not even comparable.
It creates a floor. I mean, and it's the value, I think. I mean, you can see it. You see a paver, laid driveway, like you just see it right away. It's just like recognizable just by driving by it. I mean, everybody's got concrete. Then all of a sudden you see a paver driveway, and it stands out, and it creates a ton of value, I think.
For sure. Well, actually, so let's go the opposite way for a second here. Is there a hardscaping material that's way overrated and people should think twice about using?
That's a good question. I kind of just alluded to it. I think clay brick is something that was everywhere for so long. Right. And so if you have a house that was built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, a lot of times, brick houses and stuff like that. And then a lot of times the walkways and other things, walls were built out of brick. The problem with that, the way they're mortared and stuff, is they can break down, and the durability of them is nowhere near what it is with concrete. And so I think pavers were kind of created to replace brick because of the advantages they have against brick. So which is why I recommend them so heavily. But brick is a very popular aesthetic that people want. They make pavers that are shaped and textured and designed to look like brick.
Wow. Right.
Because that's how much people want that. And so it's kind of that colonial feel.
Yep.
There's still a lot of brick that's used. And again, some people know how to do it really, really well. But brick, to me, you can get that same feel and still get the advantages of not having to mortar and wet set brick, which is a pain from an installation standpoint, and it just doesn't hold up the same way. When you create a mortar bed that's just like concrete, that can crack, and that's kind of one of my selling points for pavers is if you have a tree root that grows up underneath your walkway, it's going to heave it up a little bit, but you can literally take the pavers off, cut the root out from underneath it, and put it back. If it cracks your concrete, now you got to replace that entire run of concrete. Same with brick. If you start breaking and cracking that mortar joint, you can go in and repair it, but everybody's seen what a repaired mortar joint looks like. It doesn't match, and it stands out. And so I feel like it is... there's just a better way to kind of get that aesthetic out of it, and it's going to give you much less headaches down the line.
I think that's a great point. I mean, I was just about to say, like, you can do like the stamped concrete now. It makes it look like it's got like lines, but he's right. You can't fix it. You can fix pavers just by, pulling up one section, fixing the problem underneath, addressing it, and then laying it back down. Concrete, you cannot do that with. And I'll also say, if you got brick, a lot of people do. They just have it, For years and years, it was used, as edging around, plants. You always see it like, that little hills of the sideways slanted edging. But that all settles and all ends up falling apart, and you got to replace it. So, but if you've got brick and you've got extra brick because that's what your house is built out of, use it like I use it, which is prop up your plants and you can have fun with it. And you can use it so many different ways. You can build little pillars out of it on, in your landscape, but also on patios. So there's lots of ways to use brick around the home, rather than trying to, make it, use it in a bit of more of a natural way than trying to force it into a situation that maybe it shouldn't be used in.
Gotcha. Well, that just about does it, guys.
Cool.
Anything else? We're good.
I think we're good to go.
I think he covered it. Daniel is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to hardscaping. I mean,
truly.
Like he said, that's where he cut his teeth, and he knows a ton about it. So thank you for all of that information.
It was my pleasure.
I learned a great deal. I mean, I
didn't know
polymeric sand. I mean, I knew it was a sand. I didn't know that it was kind of acted as a glue. So I learned a lot of new stuff. So hopefully that gets you excited about any kind of hardscaping projects you might be getting into, and definitely look forward to talking more about all these different landscape ideas that you've got.
Absolutely.
All right. So next week we'll be talking about vegetable gardening. We're going to kind of do a series within our series, which is Grow Like a Bro. So we're going to start talking a little bit, throughout the year about different vegetables. We're going to kind of encompass all vegetables into this first one, kind of do a vegetable 101 type of thing. So I think this will probably turn a little bit more on my side. So Daniel will be asking me questions more. But it'll be an interesting one. So join us next week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.